Good day everyone, so hope you're all doing really well. I recently saw a video by someone called Jello Impact in which he discussed this interesting trade-off between power and versatility when it comes to choosing a character for your account. So basically, if you haven't watched this video, it's linked down below in the description, but in a very brief summary, what he's actually arguing is that units that are more powerful, for example like Nilo, are better because they enable you to beat the Spiral Abyss and content much faster in a more optimal way than units that are more versatile like Kokomi. So rather than really addressing his points one for one, I'm going to give you my own perspective on all of this. But before we do so, let's quickly look at what you guys have said here on YouTube. So I ran a poll and the majority of people have said that they basically prefer units that are more versatile or units that can better work with their other units on their account. And this is a very natural response because if I save up quite a lot of Primo Gems and I pull on a new unit, then it just makes sense that I would want that unit to work with my current units that I really like. Well, why? Because it enables me to play the game for a bit longer. It extends my longevity and playtime if I have a new unit that's very versatile, precisely because there are new ways of engaging with the content in the game, but also if a new unit can spice up what I can do with my old teams, then certainly that unit gives me a better gameplay experience. So this is very, very natural from a casual perspective, but what about a meta perspective? Well, this is now where I'm going to start giving you my own insights. When it comes to just floor 12 of the Spiral Abyss, I've got a huge issue with this idea that power is somehow the only thing that matters, or just clearing as fast as possible, precisely because power in and of itself is always exposed. So what I mean by that is that we always know which units are optimal to clear a Spiral Abyss after the fact. It's always after we've seen what the enemy lineup is and we've done a few rounds that we can recommend, oh, use these and these teams. It's very rare that you'll ever find a speedrunner that would just go into the abyss completely blind, set a world record pace, and no one can beat it. Very often people are going to try all sorts of micro little things. Everything from, am I going to use Kaz or am I going to use Venti because the enemy spawned in 2 meters to the right instead of 2 meters forward. It's all of these subtle little things that ultimately end up determining which units are going to be more effective than other units. In other words, a lot of what drives the meta and the volatility of what could be considered meta for a given investment level in the game is driven ex post. It's driven by the circumstances in the game. It's driven by the enemy types, where the enemies are spawning, and less so about the characters themselves, although that does obviously play a bit of a big role. My point, in other words, is that I don't think that it's good to just pull on units because they're powerful, because at their skill ceiling you'd be able to beat the Abyss as optimally as possible. And I don't think it's good because that in and of itself is just too volatile. That is basically the idea or the crux of my argument. By the way, that does not dismiss the amount of theory crafting or research that a lot of people have done. We certainly do know from all of the calcs and stuff that people have done what the ex-ante expectations are for a lot of the units in the game, and hence when you do consider using one team or another, you have a good sense of what could work better in which circumstances. That's what Genshin Theory Crafting is so well known for. But the problem is that in and of itself does not always translate very well into this idea of beating the Abyss as optimally as possible. In fact, it's very rare to even see that someone would use something like Child International and do that little quick melee tech where you shoot an arrow, change to his E stance, and then the moment the arrow hits and if you get a critical hit, you apply the Riptide mark before you swap off, and then you do a little bit of double swirl shenanigans and you set up, and there's so many practical and fun ways of playing, but these things don't always get into a spreadsheet's my point. You're not going to program that into GC Sim, and even if you do so, deep circumstances in the Abyss might call for a completely different rotation. So this is my point. Even though in theory we know what might be good or not good, in practice very often it doesn't translate as well, and for the majority of players, having units that are just more versatile and comfy and that can just get the job done is ultimately what I think a lot of people would actually prefer. There is also another aspect of this power versus versatility debate that we need to look at, and that is the fact that through versatility you can get this emergent power coming out of a unit. So for instance, if you've been paying attention to on screen, you might have noticed that my Kokomi tends to hit a 90k bloom here or there, and that is precisely because she is so good in managing the Dendro aura, such that she can most optimally utilize the bountiful bloom mechanic of Nilo. And that is what I would call emergent power that Kokomi has, and that is exactly what makes her so good in a team like this. Now, I know a lot of people might say, but that doesn't mean that Kokomi is powerful in and of itself, and you'd be absolutely correct. It is mostly due to Nilo, and by the very same token, Xiangling is not a triple S tier DPS. She's only good because of Bennett and Kazuha that prop up. It's mostly Bennett and Kazuha that are actually doing the work behind the scenes as to why Xiangling is so good. So I just thought I need to mention that, because people would not accept that Kokomi can be powerful, but they'd accept that Xiangling's powerful. But in both cases, you've got other units that are responsible for it. So I just thought I'd tack that onto this whole thing. In any case, let's just get back to where we were. When it comes to this power versus versatility argument, I honestly think that too much emphasis is always placed on an individual unit, whereas the circumstances and the other characters around that unit actually have far more of an impact than just the unit themselves. And that is the core crux of what I really wanted to get at. And I think a corollary to all of this is the fact that if Hoyo gave us more content types or different ways of engaging with the combat system, then you might even get new emerging metas that might be suited for the different gameplay types, and that would be, in my opinion, the most ideal way of extending the longevity of the game. A lot of what makes this game fun is ironically not with what the characters have or what's like unique or cool about a character, but rather how that character can interact with the environment. So if you had some sort of game mode like the Simulated Universe or Elysian Realm and Genshin Impact, where you can choose buffs for your character and they would get stronger, or suddenly they can do all sorts of things that they would ordinarily not be able to do, then that would give you not just a sense of having fun, but also an entirely new way of thinking and of optimizing and of developing new metas and strategies that would just be so cool. And I think ultimately, when you really boil it all down, it all comes down to the fact that if a unit is more versatile, then that type of content and the existing type of content in the game will just be so much more satisfying to engage with, rather than a unit that's just purely powerful. A terrible example of this is obviously a character like Eula, who is very powerful, but unfortunately the content just never ever really favors her, which is just such a shame for people that have a C6 Eula. Rip me. Alright, thanks for watching, and let me know what you think about all of this. Cheers.